When I married Jessica 9 years ago, I thought I had found my soulmate. Everyone called her Jess back then, and her smile could light up any room she walked into. I remember standing at the altar, watching her walk down the aisle in that stunning white dress, thinking I was the luckiest man alive. 9 years later, I would discover just how wrong I was. My name is David Parker, and this is the story of how my perfect life turned into a nightmare. I met Jess at a tech conference in San Francisco where I was presenting my latest engineering project. She was there representing a medical supplies company, and our booths were right next to each other. 3 days of casual conversation turned into dinner, which turned into dating, and eventually led to marriage. We were young, ambitious, and desperately in love, or at least I was. Back then, I was just another software engineer with big dreams. Jess supported me when I decided to start my own consulting firm, even though it meant living on a tight budget for a while. She believed in me, or maybe she just believed in what I could become. The company took off faster than either of us expected. Within 2 years, we were doing well enough to buy our dream house, a beautiful colonial-style home just outside Silicon Valley. It needed work, but structurally it was sound, and we spent weekends fixing it up together. Our nearest neighbor was half a mile away, which gave us the privacy we both wanted. We hired contractors for the major stuff, plumbing, electrical work, but did most of the cosmetic renovations ourselves. Those were happy days, filled with paint-splattered clothes and takeout dinners on the floor of our unfinished living room. Jess would joke about how sexy I looked covered in drywall dust, and I'd chase her around the house with paint-covered hands. We talked about having kids someday, but agreed to wait until the business was more established. I brought in my childhood friend, Ryan Thompson, as executive director when the company expanded. Ryan and I had been inseparable since first grade, and I trusted him completely. He was the brother I never had, the kind of friend who would tell me the truth even when it hurt. Life was good, more than good, it was perfect. The company was thriving, our home was beautiful, and I had what I thought was a loving, faithful wife. Then everything started to change so gradually at first that I barely noticed. It began with small things. Jess started going out more often with her work friends. She'd come home late, sometimes after midnight, smelling of expensive perfume and alcohol. When I asked about her evenings, she'd wave it off with vague stories about girls' nights out. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there were other changes too. Our intimacy dwindled to almost nothing. She always had an excuse. She was tired. She had a headache. She had an early meeting. When we did make love, it felt McConney, Cal, as if she was just going through the motions. The warmth in her eyes when she looked at me was gone, replaced by something I couldn't quite identify. I started noticing unexplained charges on our credit card statements. Expensive hotels in the middle of the day. High-end lingerie stores I'd never seen her wear anything from. When I asked about these, she always had a ready explanation. The hotel charges were for business lunches. The lingerie was supposed to be a surprise for our anniversary. I wanted to believe her explanations, but doubt had taken root in my mind. One evening, I confided in Ryan over drinks at his place. Something's not right with Jess, I told him, staring into my whiskey glass. What do you mean? Ryan asked, though I could tell from his expression he'd noticed something too. I told him everything, the late nights, the credit card charges, the way she'd changed. Ryan listened quietly, refilling our glasses as I talked. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Dave, I need to be honest with you, he finally said, using my childhood nickname. I've seen Jess around town a few times lately, and she wasn't with women from work. My heart stopped. What do you mean? I saw her at the Four Seasons last month, having lunch with a guy. Could have been a business meeting, I suggested weakly. Ryan shook his head. Business meetings don't usually end with kissing in the parking lot. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Why didn't you tell me? I wasn't sure at first, and I didn't want to wreck your marriage if I was wrong. But you're sure now? Ryan nodded slowly. I've seen her with him twice more since then. Different guys each time. The room seemed to spin around me. I grabbed my glass and drained it in one gulp. What do I do? I asked, more to myself than to Ryan. If I were you, I'd hire a private investigator, Ryan suggested. Get proof before you confront her. If she's cheating, you'll need evidence for the divorce. The word divorce hit me like a physical blow. I'd never imagined my marriage ending this way. But Ryan was right. I needed to know the truth. The next day, I found a private investigator named Mark Stevens who specialized in infidelity cases. His office was in a nondescript building in downtown San Jose. Tell me what's made you suspicious, he said after I sat down. I told him everything, trying to keep my voice steady. He listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he looked up at me with sympathetic eyes. I hate to say this, but what you're describing fits a classic pattern. Of what? A spouse living a double life. The late nights, the changing behavior, the unexplained expenses. These are all red flags. I hired him on the spot. The retainer felt heavy in my hand as I wrote the check. I'll need access to your house to install some surveillance equipment, he said. Nothing in the bedroom. That's illegal. But we can cover the common areas. I gave him a key and the alarm code. That evening, I told Jess I had a business dinner and wouldn't be home until late. Instead, I sat in my car down the street and watched as Mark installed the cameras. He was in and out in less than an hour. The next week was torture. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be Mark with news. I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate at work. Ryan covered for me in meetings when my mind wandered. Finally, Mark called and asked me to come to his office. You might want to bring your friend Ryan for support, he suggested. My stomach turned to ice. I knew then that whatever he had found was bad. Ryan drove us to Mark's office. The PI was waiting with a thick folder and a USB drive. Before we start, he said, I want you to know that what I'm about to show you is going to be difficult to watch. Just show me, I said through gritted teeth. Mark opened the folder and spread out several photographs. They showed Jess entering various hotels with different men. Some were taken during lunch hours, others in the evening. There's more, Mark said quietly. He turned his laptop around and played a video. It showed Jess entering our house with a man I'd never seen before. The timestamp showed it was during a day when I was supposedly at a business conference. I couldn't watch anymore. There's a pattern to her meetings, Mark continued. She sees different men throughout the week, but Thursday nights seem to be special. What do you mean? Every Thursday night, she hosts what appears to be a private party at your house. A party? Mark hesitated. More like an orgy, Mr. Parker. Multiple men, usually between 6 and 10. I felt the room start to spin. Ryan grabbed my arm to steady me. How long? I managed to ask. Based on my investigation and interviews with your neighbors, this has been going on for at least 6 months. 6 months. While I was working late to grow our business, my wife had been turning our home into a brothel. There's something else you should know, Mark added. The men she's involved with, they're not just random guys. They appear to be part of an organized group. What kind of group? An underground sex club. Very exclusive, very secretive, and very dangerous. I thought about all the business trips Jess had taken lately, all the networking events she claimed to attend. How many of them have been real? What do you recommend I do? I asked Mark. Honestly, get a good lawyer and file for divorce immediately. But she'll get half of everything, I protested. The company, the house, everything I've worked for. Mark leaned forward. Mr. Parker, I understand your concern about the money, but these people are dangerous. My wife is dangerous. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Your wife is playing with fire, Mark said seriously. These men, they're not just wealthy executives looking for a good time. Some of them have criminal connections. One of them is under federal investigation. I sat there, trying to process everything. The woman I loved, the life we'd built together. It was all a lie. I need time to think, I said, standing up. Ryan followed me out of the office. Dave, wait, he called after me. You shouldn't be alone right now. I need to be, I said. I need to figure out what to do next. But I already knew what I was going to do. I was going to catch them in the act. I was going to confront Jess and her lovers face to face. I had no idea that decision would almost cost me my life. I spent the next week planning my confrontation. Ryan tried to talk me out of it. Let the lawyers handle it, he kept saying, but I couldn't let it go that easily. I needed to see for myself. I needed to look into Jess's eyes and understand why. Thursday came around again. I told Ryan I was going home early with a migraine. Instead, I parked my car a block away from our house and waited. Around 7, the cars started arriving. Expensive ones, Mercedes, BMWs, even a Maserati. I watched as men in business suits enter my house one by one. Jess greeted each of them at the door, wearing a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before. By 8 o'clock, I counted 7 cars in and around our driveway. I waited another 30 minutes, giving them time to get comfortable, to start their party. The sound of music and laughter drifted through the evening air. My hands were shaking as I approached our front door. I still had my key, but I didn't use it. Instead, I rang the doorbell. The music inside quieted slightly. I heard footsteps approaching. Jess opened the door, her face flushed and hair slightly disheveled. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw me. David, what are you doing here? I live here, I said, pushing past her into the house. Or have you forgotten that? David, wait, she started to say, but I was already heading for the stairs. I could hear voices from our bedroom. Male voices, laughing and talking. I took the stairs 2 at a time, Jess running behind me. David, stop. You don't understand. I threw open the bedroom door. What I saw inside will haunt me forever. There were men scattered around our bedroom. Some dressed, some not. All of them looking at me with varying degrees of surprise and annoyance. One man, larger than the others, stepped forward. Who the hell are you? He demanded. I'm her husband, I said, my voice shaking with rage. This is my house. The large man looked at Jess, who had come up behind me. Is this the rich tech guy you told us about? Jess didn't answer. She didn't need to. I could see the truth in her eyes. I've told you about him, she finally said. The boring one who's always working. The men laughed. I had never felt so humiliated in my life. Get out, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. All of you, get out of my house. The large man stepped closer. He must have been 6'4", at least 250 pounds. Or what? He sneered. What are you going to do about it, little man? I should have listened to Ryan. I should have let the lawyers handle it. But rage and humiliation clouded my judgment. I swung at him. It was like hitting a brick wall. Before I could react, his fist connected with my face. I felt something crack. The room spun. I stumbled backward, but he wasn't done. Another blow caught me in the ribs. I heard Jess laughing. The sound was worse than the pain. Teach him a lesson, I heard her say. But don't kill him. Not yet, anyway. More blows rained down. I tried to fight back, but there were too many of them. Too many fists, too many boots. The last thing I remember was Jess's voice. Put him in the van. Take him somewhere quiet. Then darkness. When I came to, I was tied to a chair. A hood covered my head, but I could hear voices. What are we going to do with him? Boss says to make it look like an accident. What about the company? She says once he's gone, she gets half of everything. And she'll sell her share to us? That's the deal. My head throbbed. Every breath sent spikes of pain through my ribs. I could taste blood in my mouth. They were going to kill me. The woman I had loved for 9 years had ordered my death. All for money. All for the company I had built from nothing. I heard a car door slam. Felt myself being lifted. Let's make this quick, someone said. I've got another appointment tonight. They threw me into what felt like a van. The engine started. We drove for what seemed like hours. Every bump sent waves of agony through my battered body. Finally, the van stopped. Rough hands dragged me out. "Walk," someone commanded. They removed the rope from my ankles but left my hands tied. The ground was uneven beneath my feet. I could smell pine trees. We were somewhere in the mountains. "On your knees," the voice commanded. This was it. This was how I was going to die. In the middle of nowhere, on my knees, killed by my wife's lovers. The first blow caught me in the back. I fell forward. More kicks and punches followed. They were methodical about it. Professional. Finally, the beating stopped. I lay there, barely conscious. Someone checked my pulse. "Nothing," they said. "Leave him. The animals will take care of the rest." I heard them walking away. The van's engine started again. The sound grew fainter and fainter until there was only silence. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes? Hours? Every breath was agony. But I was alive. Somehow I was still alive. With my hands still tied behind my back, I managed to rub my head against the ground. The hood came off. Moonlight filtered through the trees. I was in a forest, probably somewhere in the Santa Cruz Mountains. My left eye was swole, in shut. Blood had dried on my face. But I could see. And if I could see, I could move. I had to move, stay here, and I would die, either from my injuries or from exposure. Or they would come back to check. I forced myself to my feet. The world spun, but I stayed upright. Pick a direction and walk. That's all I could do. I chose downhill, hoping it would lead to civilization. Every step was torture. My ribs screamed in protest. But I kept moving. I had to keep moving. The moon provided enough light to avoid the worst obstacles. But I still stumbled often. Fell more times than I could count. Each time, getting up was harder. But I got up. I had to. After what felt like miles, I saw a light through the trees. A house. Or maybe a cabin. My vision was blurry. Everything hurt. But that light meant people. Meant help. I stumbled toward it. There was a fence. I couldn't climb it. Couldn't even open the gate with my hands tied. So I did the only thing I could. I screamed. Used every bit of strength I had left to yell for help. Then the world went black again. The next time I opened my eyes, I was lying on a soft surface. A bed? A couch? Don't try to move. The voice was female. Gentle. "You're safe now." I tried to focus on the speaker. A woman in her 40s. Long, gray-streaked hair. Kind eyes. "Oh." My voice was barely a whisper. "I'm Grace," she said. "You're at my farm. I found you passed out by my gate." "Police." "No police," she said firmly. "Not yet. Not until you tell me what happened." I closed my eyes. Everything hurt. "Rest now," Grace said. "We'll talk when you're stronger." I drifted off again. When I woke next, the pain had dulled somewhat. Grace was there, changing bandages I hadn't realized I had. "How long?" I managed to ask. "2 days," she said. "You've been in and out." "My friend. Need to call." She handed me a phone. My hands shook as I dialed Ryan's number. "Hello." His voice nearly broke me. "Ryan, it's Dave." "Jesus Christ. Where are you?" "Everyone's looking for you." "I'm safe," I said. "That's all I can say right now. Jess has been here, crying, saying you disappeared." I laughed. It hurt. "Don't tell her you heard from me." "Dave, what's going on?" "Trust me, Ryan. Please." A long pause. "Okay," he finally said. "But you better explain everything soon." I ended the call. Grace was watching me, ready to tell me what happened. I looked at her, this stranger who had saved my life, and I told her everything. Recovery was slow at Grace's farm. My body healed faster than my mind. The bruises faded. The cuts closed. But the betrayal, that wound went deeper. Grace never pushed for more information than I was ready to give. She simply provided a safe haven while I healed. Her farm was remote, accessible only by a winding dirt road. No wonder those men had left me for dead in these mountains. They probably, though. No one could survive out here. I spent hours sitting on her porch, watching the fog roll in over the mountains, thinking about revenge. Not just against Jess, but against all of them. They had tried to kill me for money, for my company. Now they would pay. After 2 weeks, I felt strong enough to start planning. Grace's internet connection was slow but secure. I started researching, looking for ways to make them suffer. The dark web opened up possibilities I'd never considered before. I learned about things I never wanted to know existed. Ways to hurt people, ways to make them disappear. But most of those methods required trusting others. I couldn't risk that. This had to be something I could do alone, something that couldn't be traced back to me. Then I found what I was looking for. A formula. A combination of common chemicals that, when mixed properly, would create the perfect accident. I spent another week studying chemistry, learning about reaction times, temperature variables. Everything had to be perfect. Grace never asked what I was doing on her computer. She just brought me coffee and sandwiches. Sometimes she'd sit with me in silence. Her presence was comforting. Finally, I was ready to put my plan in motion. I called Ryan from Grace's landline. "I need your help," I told him. "But I need you to trust me." "Where have you been?" he demanded. "Everyone thinks you're dead." "Not everyone," I said bitterly. "Jess knows I'm alive." I told him everything. The beatings, the attempt on my life, their plan to take over the company. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. I knew something was wrong. "But this, will you help me? What do you need?" "Just keep running the company like normal. If anyone asks, you haven't heard from me." Ryan agreed. Through him, I learned that Jess was still hosting her Thursday parties, still playing the grieving wife in public. She'd even filed a missing person report, trying to establish an alibi. Grace drove me to town one day. I bought everything I needed from different hardware stores, common items that wouldn't raise suspicion. That night, I mixed the first batch, testing the reactions, making sure I had the proportions right. A mistake could be fatal, not just for them, but for me. Thursday came around again. Grace hugged me before I left. "Be careful," she said, "but do what you must." I rented a car under a false name, paid cash, drove to our neighborhood as the sun was setting. Right on schedule, the cars started arriving. I counted 9 this time, a record crowd for Jess's weekly entertainment. I waited until I heard the music start, until I was sure they were all distracted. The back door lock hadn't been changed. Amateur mistake. They thought I was dead. Why bother? I moved silently through the kitchen, placing the chemicals exactly as I had practiced. The first liquid created a thin trail up the stairs. The second, parallel to it. The third would start the reaction. Chemistry is all about timing, about catalyst and reaction, about chain events that, once started, can't be stopped. I closed the back door quietly behind me, walked, not ran, to my car, drove away slowly. No need to attract attention. In my rearview mirror, I saw the first flash. Then the orange glow began. By the time the fire department arrived, it would be too late. The chemicals I used would burn hot enough to destroy any evidence, any traces of foul play. The official investigation took 2 months. I watched from a distance as they sifted through the ashes. 10 bodies were recovered. Jess and 9 men. The cause was ruled accidental. A gas leak, they said. A tragic accident. I attended the funeral, played the part of the grieving husband who had just lost his wife while away on business. No one questioned my story. Why would they? I was the victim here, the devastated husband who had lost everything in a tragic accident. If anyone noticed the satisfied smile as they lowered her casket, they didn't mention it. The insurance paid out. I sold the land to a developer. Let them build something new there. I had no desire to rebuild. Too many memories. Ryan never asked about what happened. He just helped me rebuild my life. Kept the company running while I recovered. Months passed. I tried to find Grace's farm again, to thank her properly. But the mountain roads all looked the same. Her house seemed to have vanished like a dream. Maybe that was for the best. Some angels aren't meant to be found again. I moved into a small apartment in the city, started going to therapy, dealt with my trauma, or at least learned to live with it. That's where I met Emily. She lived down the hall, a kindergarten teacher with kind eyes and a gentle smile. We started with casual greetings in the hallway, then coffee in the morning, then dinner. She never pushed, never demanded more than I could give, just listened when I needed to talk, held me when the nightmares came. Slowly, I learned to trust again, to love again, but I was smarter this time. When we talked about marriage, I insisted on a prenup. Emily understood. She had her own stories of betrayal, her own scars. Maybe that's why we worked so well together. We both knew how precious trust was, and how easily it could be broken. Ryan stood as my best man at our wedding. A small ceremony, just close friends and family. No elaborate celebrations. No false promises. Just two people who had found each other in the aftermath of their own personal storms. Sometimes late at night, I think about Jess, about what turned her into the monster she became. Was it the money? The power? Or was she always like that, and I just couldn't see it? I'll never know, and maybe that's okay. Some questions don't need answers. Some wounds don't need to be reopened. Emily stirs beside me in bed. R eats from my hand in her sleep, and I realize something. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead us to the best outcomes. Sometimes we have to walk through fire to find our way home. I survived. I got my revenge. And in the end, I found something better than vengeance. I found peace. The company continues to grow. Ryan and I have expanded into new markets. Life goes on, but I'm different now. Stronger, wiser, more cautious, and surprisingly happier. They say living well is the best revenge. They're wrong. The best revenge is surviving, growing, finding joy again despite everything they try to take from you. That's the real victory. That's the real revenge. And every morning when I wake up next to Emily, every time I see her smile, I know I won. Not just survived, won. And that's worth everything I went through to get here. Every scar, every nightmare, every moment of pain. Because in the end, I'm still here. And they're not. That's all that matters. That's all that ever mattered.